Welcome to AI Everywhere Leaders podcast, where we explore how artificial intelligence is transforming business operations and strategic partnerships. I'm your host, Adriana, and today we're diving into a critical but often overlooked area of business growth: market development funds, and how AI is revolutionizing partner marketing strategies. Our guest today is Linda Rønningen, Senior Marketing Director at Crayon, where she leads partnership strategies for one of the world's leading vendor-agnostic IT consultancies. With over 15 years of experience in B2B technology and partner marketing, Linda brings deep expertise in maximizing MDF investments and building AI-enhanced partnership programs that drive real revenue impact. Linda, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Adriana. I'm excited to be here.
Linda, before we dive into MDF strategies, can you give our listeners a sense of your role at Crayon and how partner marketing has evolved in the technology space over the past few years?
Yes, of course. So at Crayon, I lead global campaigns and partner marketing across our strategic partners, including Microsoft, AWS, and Google, in over 45 markets. I work closely with our alliance team and our local sales team to ensure that MDF actually drives business results. Partner marketing has changed a lot in the past couple of years. I used to be very much tactical, all about events and all about quick wins. I think now what I'm seeing is that it's really been built on strategy first and more ROI proven results, right? So it's no longer just two logos together. It's about shared growth and how do we measure this shared growth in the future? So this is where AI can make a really good strategic partner to make a nice recipe.
Let's start with the fundamentals for our listeners who might not be familiar with what MDF means. Can you explain that and why they are so critical for all the technology partnerships, really?
Absolutely. So MDF stands, as you mentioned earlier, market development funds. Those are vendor allocated budgets that are meant to boost demand, aid with brand awareness, and overall drive business growth. This co-investment of marketing funds can actually fund activities like campaigns, events, content, with obviously an expected ROI at the end. MDF is actually a good indicator and a good enabler for critical growth. So this helps you essentially as a partner go to market faster. Instead of having to use your marketing funds to go to market, it actually helps you multiply this. And I always pitch it as a multiplier, right? So you have X amount of budget, your vendor is able to really supplement this. And what I also advise here too is that you work with a vendor that is part of your GTM and not bring in a vendor to force into your GTM. This is where you can really see substantial growth as for both partner and vendor.
Excellent. Excellently explained. From your experience, what mistakes do you see companies are doing when it comes to MDF allocation and utilization?
We all want to be good stewards of the funding, right? And we also want to make sure that we're looking good in front of our vendors, but it's critical for us to have a strategy in place. And that's what I mentioned earlier. If your vendor is part of your GTM, you're going to win. It's already part of your DNA as a partner. You're not forcing this relationship or strategy, right? So what we develop at Crayon is what we call strategic success formulas. That these formulas are meant for you to go ahead and actually develop these funds. So it starts with a bit of a pronged approach, right? You want to make sure that it's specific to the region that you're activating and specific to the activation that you're wanting to promote as well. But you also need to make sure that it aligns with your respective growth goals locally. So it's not a one size fits all. You can't just apply this in Slovenia as you do in Australia. That's something you definitely need to make sure that you keep in mind so that you can have sustained momentum overall.
Thank you, Linda. That's a really good explanation. Can you share with our listeners how has the approach to MDF changed as businesses have become more data focused? What metrics do you see matter the most?
So MDF is really transforms a business, right? So for just running an activity to actual accountability. And actually, MDF demands a clear ROI. We want to make sure that we're prioritizing data first planning and meticulous measurement. This really needs to be really backed into pipeline influence and lead quality and velocity in order for us to really measure conversion to revenue, rather than what I would call superficial or what I would call like early stage metrics, such as clicks and downloads. I think those are great to measure, but we want to make sure that we're measuring those in order to be able to ultimately then measure your velocity, your conversion to revenue, and your ultimately your quality of lead that you're actually getting from your campaigns. I think it's great to have those, what I would call light touch metrics first off, so that then you can build on and ultimately and launch the entire funnel and track the entire funnel.
Linda, at Crayon, you work in a vendor agnostic environment, which gives you a unique perspective. How do different vendors approach MDF programs, and what do you see happening from that perspective?
Of course, having worked with vendor agnostic environment is really great for us at Crayon to make sure we have a distinct POV in the market. But with that comes a lot of inconsistencies potentially. Some vendors run extremely great programs. I don't want to discount that either. But there's some vendors that definitely have a more of a flexible approach, which I think is to sometimes their detriment, where they're very eager to hand out funding, but the funding is not necessarily followed up in what I would call a strategic way. Right. And there's some vendors which I would want to call out as best practices, right? These are vendors that have more of a structured program with quarterly business plans associated to it and all that ladder up to a yearly or even a program specific business plan. So it's really a holistic way of looking at the MDF and also the business plan as well. So it's not just MDF and business plan, it's both of them together as one. And these are partners that offer co-marketing playbooks. These are partners that really set up a clear ROI with you at the beginning. So I would advise if you're thinking of setting up a vendor co-marketing campaign as a partner or vice versa, that you follow these three principles, right? It's co-planning with the partners up front. One of the key levers that is outside of MDF, but very integral to MDF is enablement. If you're enabling your sellers, you're enabling your alliance teams, your marketers, you need to enable everyone to become your biggest cheerleader internally and externally. This is critical for your success. Sometimes it's overlooked. Sometimes there's a lot of speed to market where we overlook this critical moment. And with that, you also need to define what does success look like 3 months, 6 months to a year, so that you can keep yourself honest on both sides of the table how we can best operate together and really see that multiplier effect in motion.
Excellent. What role does partner enablement play in MDF success? What do you see happening from that perspective?
From that perspective, I think we do quite well on our side, or we have a great enablement team at Crayon, and this is integral to our success. We see this that our vendor campaigns or co-marketing campaigns that have enablement built into our, let's say, curriculum at Crayon, where we have monthly, quarterly, and even sometimes yearly reviews on vendor updates. If this is part of our constant communication and the vendor proactively works with us and we work with the vendor, we see this really impact our return on investment. We see folks engaged and we really see what we call the light bulb moment go off, where people get it. It's an aha moment. People really understand. And because it is quite intimidating to be a vendor agnostic company, right? We have to keep up with so much. But at the end of the day, what we're great at is having a distinct POV. And without enablement, you're not able to really kind of find your voice within the space. So this to me really helps. And as mentioned, if it's part of our regular cadence that our enablement team is so successful at running, we need to make sure that we incorporate that. And that's something that I would advise vendors to do, is to make sure that they're part of that curriculum, that they understand is that part of the partner's day-to-day life. How can we go ahead and make sure that we implement ourselves in there as well?
Excellent. Thank you, Linda. Now, this is the part where it gets really interesting. How do you see AI is changing the game for MDF management and also creating content, creative variations, and internal workflows?
While MDF specifically, like budget allocation, still remains very much human led, but AI is such a game changer when it comes to execution and acceleration. We definitely leverage AI for content creative variations and even internal workflows to build out global campaigns. This really helps us with saving time on assets. You can only imagine 4 years ago when I started Crayon, when we would have to do content iterations, I can actually see it in the last 4 years. We spend weeks creating content versus I just got a revision in one day as of yesterday, right? Or you have the human check over the work, but there's just the speed is incredible to me. And this is what really helps us be not reactive, but be proactive as possible because you're ahead of the curve, right? So yes, of course, AI will have its hallucinations as we've seen in some models, but that's why we're here. That's why we're the experts. And if we're here, if you are able to generate a proper prompt, if you're able to feed and give the right corrections as a true expert, it is gold for us. And as I mentioned, we're going from 1 week to 2 weeks to 1 day turnarounds when it comes to copy, which is massive because we're 45 different countries and we're so many different languages that we need to translate to. We do not want to delay our content getting to our subsidiaries by any means. And by a day or two, it could really hurt us, especially when we're trying to have a distinct POV on a trending topic, essentially. So I would say that's what really helps us from that perspective. I can also see that, agentic AI can really help us in the future, but that's definitely something I've explored on my personal level. I think from a corporate perspective, we're proposing it, but I think that that's definitely something we'll get more and more use of it at Crayon, but not right now at the moment.
Can you walk us through some specific examples of how AI tools are being used to optimize MDF adoption, MDF allocation, and also track the campaign's performance, especially mentioning so many countries, different languages, different particularities?
This is where I really like to look at retroactive performance. I really want to go ahead and sit with what has been done and how can we go ahead and analyze this, right? So in my past lives, I've built, let's say, formulas, mini algorithms with my old agencies, and how do we go ahead and feed this data, right? So there's a bit of that stayed with me that I have kind of fed into Copilot, Gemini, just to kind of help me figure out how to analyze the performance, the campaigns, and use that to then find, for example, help an emerging country find out their media mix, help a country that has done so well to give advice to another country that needs to scale up. It's almost to use that to really help us remove the guessing. If you have enough data, you can then feed the AI like agents to really help you all up, right? So I think that is one of the ways that we end up using it to really help us. And of course, with data, if you're able to have the right data in place, you're able to have the right dashboards to quickly analyze your campaigns. I think that this is one of the things we've learned at Crayon is data integrity is everything. It's like your own integrity as a person. Data integrity is just as important to have because if you have the data, you're able to have all of this information at your fingertips and to be able to make those quick decisions and have that instinct of saying, all right, this worked in Slovenia, this worked in the US. Let's go ahead and see how we can kind of analyze this and make this into a formula that we can actually replicate in all markets. Or what are the nuances that we need to consider all of?
One challenge with MDF programs is often the complexity of managing multiple partners with multiple campaigns, multiple budgets simultaneously. How does AI helps you streamline this process?
It really helps us with persona work because at the end of the day, we cannot sell what someone is not in the market for. And we cannot force a product offering or service to someone who's not receptive to it. So we need to understand who are the core buying personas that we're activating towards, right? Who is part of the entire buying committee? Who's influencing, who's buying, who's actually the user? How do we understand this? So this really helps us kind of get outside of our own thinking and to validate that thinking too, and help us with quicker research. I find it to be a game changer because I can think of a buying persona, I can talk to sales, and then I can make sure I validate it with Gartner, make sure I validate it with other third parties. But it's just the quick and speed of it, of just visualizing it quite quickly. That would have taken, I know, 6 years ago, it would have taken me a week to visualize this and to create like a strategic framework and to make it in PowerPoint when I can just take my sales input, take my Gartner input, take my third party validation input, take what, let's say my vendor tells me and take what I know as a marketer. So it's 5 different data sources or even 6 to 10 different data sources I can take to one and build a framework quite instantaneously versus having to do all this manual work and having to see where are the discrepancies and where is the overlap. That is so helpful for me because at the end of the day, this then helps you talk to the right people at the right time. We work with Enlift and we work with Bombora, which are great levers that we have in our toolbox for us to then go ahead and say, these are companies in market, these are companies that have this existing tech stack. And then we can go ahead and say, right, let's go ahead and go to market to what they actually want to hear and craft our messaging to what they want to hear and make sure that we're optimizing based off of that versus the us trying to, say this is our ICP and our ICP must want to hear this messaging, and that's no longer the case, right? And you're wasting dollars, and that's where you can reinvest those dollars into those companies that have actually raised their hands and are more likely to resonate with the message that you have. That to me is how we can use AI and use everything in your toolbox to just speed to market, essentially.
You're avoiding losing money, but also you're acting much quicker, so it helps.
Exactly.
From a predictive analytics standpoint, how can AI help companies make informed decisions, better decisions about which partners and which activities to invest MDF in?
So that's where you can go back to your existing campaigns and results that you have. But let's take the analysis of like we're starting from zero, right? You can go ahead and plug in to, let's say, Copilot or any other AI that's out there that you can go ahead and leverage. You can plug in and say, this is the formula. How can I work with the formula to success, right? You can take that to help you use some predictive modeling and help you along the way. Because think about all the different resources you have as a marketer. There's so many resources and so many conflicting opinions that when you're doing all of this research to go ahead and get started, this helps you kind of cut through the noise and just analyze what is the best practice overall and help you start. And of course, you can always correct it as you go along, right? Where it's not everything that's given to you is not going to be 100% accurate. This is where your kind of discernment is really important to have, where you can understand like this is the advice that's been given by the output, right? But then you can always ask for for sourcing. Where do you get your sources, right? So then you can validate a lot of the output. So it can help you build what I call a success formula, where it can help you understand what are the metrics you need to be looking at. Because if you're starting from zero, you need to understand how are you building momentum? How are people actually engaging with your content? How are people actually converting? And what is making folks really interested in what you have to say? So for me, that really helps you build a foundation of a predictive modeling that you can then take towards your weekly, bi-weeklies, and even quarterly reviews, internally, externally, however you'd like to. You can customize that and you can have that as part of your toolkit versus testing and learning on your own, right? This takes a little bit of the guessing game out of it.
Love it. What about personalization? How do you see AI enabling more targeted, effective partner marketing activities, especially when we're looking at campaigns and you're working with NDF programs from different vendors?
Yes. So personalization is for us is very critical to have. So this is where you have to analyze like your marketing automation system and you have to see what folks are responding to. While some marketing automation systems have more personalization built in, sometimes you do have to go in there and do personalization yourself. And this is where you can, if your marketing automation system doesn't have that degree of personalization, you can try to back into it with AI, right? You can see how you can say, okay, these are the results from the campaign. Go ahead and analyze this. These are the personas that I have in this campaign. And this is the messaging I've given. And let's go ahead and tweak this messaging, right? And again, you will have the discernment at the end of the day. You will understand, like, is this good or bad, right? But it'll help you. What I think helps you the most is that blank page syndrome, where you just have a blank page in front of you, don't know where to start. It helps you get started and then just quickly make those decisions. Because again, we need speed, right? And I think that that's one of the things that really helps you analyze everything versus if you don't have personalization built into your automation systems, then this is a way for you to really up your marketing stack.
Yeah, use it as a companion. I'm trying to avoid say Copilot because it's a really good name, right, for the companion and what it does. But I'm trying to keep being a bit agnostic. Obviously, this is not a paid podcast by Microsoft by all means. Are there any AI-driven automation tools that you found particularly effective for MDF and, management and partner campaign execution?
Well, I don't want to name a lot of them by name, but definitely content generation is the key for us, right? I think when you're working with a great content generation tool, that'd be perfect for you to have, right? I think that's what really helps us. But to your point, personalization, making sure that you're localizing as well. This is another thing I personally use a lot, where it's like take the cultural nuance to my writing. Because that's a lot of things where, as much as a third culture kid as I am, I still don't know every single nuance in the world, right? So I need to understand like what works in every market so I can make sure that I'm writing something that is taking that into account. And this is where the content generation AI really helps me to get that to that as well. It also helps you with briefs. Something as simple as a brief. The amount of times I've spent in my life filling out a brief, it takes weeks, right? So this is something that if you have the right input, you can fill out a brief instantaneously and have that, with a review committee approved within hours versus weeks in the past, right? So I think this really helps me get tangible outputs and also really helps me with reviewing copy iterations. This is definitely something that for me really, really helps me with the overall MDF. While this isn't like how to manage the actual budget itself, that comes more with the analyzing the campaign and the performance itself. This is more about you feeding the right prompts of how to get the right strategy, right? You might have an overall or true strategy for what you need to do, but you need to make sure that you're feeding that to the system, to the AI, for you to understand what exactly you can get from your campaign. So, for example, you have a media mix and you just want to make sure, is this media mix good? How do we go ahead and make sure this media mix will work? How do we measure benchmarks? You might know all of this, right? But you can ask for the citing sources of where you're seeing that this is proven. So it almost like gives you ammo to take back to your leadership. Like these are the strategies you're going to implement. And Gartner, these 5 different sources say that this is the right way to go forward, right? So it helps you with political movements. It also helps you with day to day, such as customized messaging, customized content, and overall campaign briefs. But it can also really help you kind of find your way when you're a little bit lost or you're starting from scratch.
Yeah, sounds great. Let's talk a bit about the bottom line, the return of investment measurement. How would you recommend organizations establish clear metrics and KPIs for their MDF investment?
It depends on where you are, but you need to start from somewhere, right? So you need to start with what are your main goals? And you need to be quite clear with them because pipeline awareness and engagement are distinctly different. You need to agree on which one of those 3 or fourth item that I haven't mentioned, but it needs to be one of those metrics that are more encompassing, right? So if it's awareness, how do you measure that, right? How do you measure that? Is that the overall reach? Is that your frequency? Is that your overall landing pages, views? Like, how do you measure that, right? So you need to make sure you have a handshake meeting with your partner and your vendor on this, and you have to be quite clear. So most commonly, it's pipeline, right? When it comes to vendor and partner relationships, this is where you need to make sure you understand how do you define a marketing qualified lead and how do you define a sales qualified lead. You need to be speaking the same language because most often I find that an MQL and SQL mean vastly different things at every organization I've worked in. So that needs to be in the same language and the same font. You cannot have that be different at any means. So that needs to be, once you have that agreed, right? And you understand, but you need to have a formula to get there. You can't just have a wish that you're going to have 100 MQLs. How much does an MQL cost in your market? You need to understand all of those basics before you can even make a proposal. I understand it's very attractive to look at the potential money that you can get from a vendor, but if you don't even know how much an MQL costs in your market, you need to do that due diligence first and foremost so that you can understand and you can build that trust with your vendor. Like, I actually know how much it costs and significantly much more expensive than we thought or significantly less expensive than we thought. So these are our new goals, right? So that's something I want to make sure that everyone takes to them as well. And you need to have a clear way of what's your source of truth. Is it our CRM? Is it the vendor partner portal? What is the source of truth for campaigns? And what are you going to look at every month? And does that data agree? Again, data integrity, just as integral as our own integrity. Like, do you have that visible for you? And is that something that you're agreeing upon every month, every week? How are you looking at this? So this to me is critical for everyone to be on the same page. And I think we need to understand what you can expect to have a return on investment. So you can't just make sure you agree with that upfront, then you will be able to have success at the end. Because an ROI of 1 to 10, 1 to 20, 1 to 30, 1 to 50, however ambitious you are, if you don't have a path to get there, you'll both be disappointed at the quarterly review, right? So as much as you want to say 1 to 20, 1 to 30, 1 to 10, if you don't know how to get there, that's where the challenge really comes into place. As long as you understand, hey, I have a clear way of getting there, then you can both agree on those KPIs.
Excellent. And also the markets are different. In each country, the preference is different. The variations in touch points are different. So yeah, there's a lot to take into consideration. But I do love your approach, your systematic approach using the formula. Which gets me to my next question, attribution, because I know attribution is always challenging in partner marketing. Probably all the partners are struggling with that. How do you see AI and advanced analytics help solve the attribution puzzle for MDF campaigns?
That's a great question. So attribution can be quite challenging, right? Especially depending on the varying maturity levels that you're at. And sales cycles are quite long. So this is where maybe the last touch, first touch attribution can be quite deceiving to marketers, right? Because if you're really using first and last touch and you're not using every single touch point in the way to really account for attribution, I think you're missing the entire picture. So for us, what we end up using is Power BI to really help us aggregate all of our CRM data. Not to call out Power BI, but I think it's just definitely something that we're using at Crayon specifically that helps us with aggregating all of our data into a more visual landscape that we can actually understand which touch points are leading to the outcome that we're desiring, right? And help us analyze how long are these conversions actually taking and how frequently we need to make sure we're getting content out there to the market. So from my perspective, it helps us kind of solve the puzzle one step at a time. But that is all about how you set up your campaigns. How do you set up your tagging for your campaigns? It's quite integral. So well, yes, you might have the proper AI or data studios to really visualize the components. Definitely something that you want to make sure that you have in place is tracking along the way. Whether you're tracking your social media, your organic or paid media tactics, that somehow makes its way to your ultimate attribution, because then you'll be able to justify all of those touch points that took for that ultimate conversion overall. Because I think that's the main thing at marketing and sales, or sales might have the last conversation, but there were 20 different touch points that were had that were marketing driven before that seller made that phone call that need to be accounted for. And then we also need to make sure that we're integrating, right? Like this is where if you have the right data set and you have the right, let's say, not data set, but the right data all up, you can actually pull this together and say, well, it was 20 different touch points that were led by marketing. It took 6 to 9 months before you even called them, because we needed to warm up that customer to really have that conversation. That we're not ready to have that conversation 9 months ago, but we did all the due diligence to have that conversation, right? So to me, it helps us solve that puzzle piece, if you will. And it's not perfect science, what I would call just yet, because you can't just look at a dashboard and say, well, this is the only source of truth. It's a little bit of digging around, making sure you're looking at all the different touch points. And that's where a data studio can be quite helpful for you to aggregate all of those data points.
Linda, from your experience, what's a realistic timeline for seeing ROI from MDF investments, and how do you manage your expectations with internal stakeholders or external stakeholders?
And this will vary this is where a global role, 45 different countries that I need to be cognizant of. What works in Australia doesn't work in the US and vice versa, and everywhere in between. I guess I should have used New Zealand to the US, but it's very different country by country. And even though they speak the same languages, it's very still different. There's still so much cultural nuances. But what I always ask the vendor is, what do you want to see the next 30 to 60 days? And then I back into that because I need to understand how quickly are vendors really looking for results. And then I focus on, okay, well, in the next 30 to 60 days, this is a product that takes roughly 6 to 9 months to close. What can I do to make sure that if I already have hand raisers in my, let's say, CRM, how do I engage with them to help us all win, right? So it's almost like making sure that you're meeting the customer where they're at so that you can meet the vendor and partner essentially goals all up. So what I always ask is, what do you need to win this quarter? And what can we do to set you up for the next 3 to 6 quarters so that we're in a good place, right? So it's almost like the short term and the long term. And this is where I always want to say you have to build the demand immediately so that you can start seeing those results in 6 months or 3 months. But then you need to understand, start with where you can win. And a lot of the times as a partner, we have a lot of customers that already have raised their hands and we need to make sure that we're engaging with them. So this is something you need to always think about, is not always focusing on the net new, but also thinking about like your customers, servicing your customer with the best offering possible. And this is where the vendor agnostic plays critical, because and this is where you can leverage Enlift and Bombora and all different tooling that you can use, that you can have a little bit more of intelligence when it comes to which customer you're reaching out to and with what messaging, because then you can have a little bit more predictability, if you will, on what exactly they might want to hear from you. They're not going to raise their hand for, let's say, AI when they're really just looking for migration, right? So you need to talk to them in their language. So this is how you can make a quick analysis of how you can win. Your customer is ready to talk to you, ready to raise their hand on a specific topic. Make sure you address those customers first and foremost. But then in the meantime, you also have an always on approach to capture in demand, because that way you're building a pipeline while you're servicing your existing customers.
Excellent. How do you balance short-term campaign performance with longer-term relationship building and market development through MDF programs?
So I think it's more about the segmentation. And I maybe alluded to this earlier, where it's making sure that you understand where you're going to drive results and when. That's, I think, critical for you to understand. If you don't understand this from a marketing perspective, this is where you need to have a very honest conversation with sales on how their pipeline looks like today and how you can help them either increase their velocity or convert their velocity even further. I think that this is something you need to have. What I look at it is you need to have performance driven activities, and then you need to have what I would call relationship building activities simultaneously running. So what I call performance driven is pipeline and lead generation focused. What I call relationship building is thought leadership and co-branded content. A lot of partner marketers, a lot of vendor, like let's say marketing centrals, offer a lot of content that's available to you. What I suggest is that you look through this and you talk to your sellers, you talk to your leadership team, and you come up with a distinctive POV. This, I think, really helps you stand out, right? Is how can we go ahead and effectively go to market without sounding redundant or similar to everyone else in the market? This is, I think, critical for you to have. My idea is to really have always two swim lanes: demand, performance driven, and then more long term driven with thought leadership and co branded content. I think that really helps you from relationship building with a vendor. It's always going to be results based. If you're able to prove your results, you're earning your trust every single day. And that's where it's very critical for you to understand your business very well before you approach and before you accept an MDF, a proposal first and foremost. Because then you'll be able to really build that trust seamlessly with immediate results or obviously those longer term results.
Yeah, and I can confirm that Linda and I managed to build trust from the first call we ever had, just because we're both super data driven people, and that helped a lot. Now, back to the question, what role does competitive intelligence play in MDF strategy? How do you ensure programs stand out in a crowded marketplace?
I think that this is critical. Pain intelligence is something from my agency days. I'm so programmed to doing it. It's part of my living and breathing, right? So it's one of the core steps, right? So when I get a brief, or when I get set, when someone, let's say one of my wonderful sellers says, hey, we just signed a deal and we're going to add this vendor to our GTM. And while, yes, we're going to add this vendor to the GTM, it's like, who do we compete with in this space? How do I understand about how they're marketing? Because I also want to make sure that I'm looking at to see what they're doing. Are they actually activating? And how are they activating? And luckily for us, like, we always have a distinct POV, so I never have to worry too much about our vendors or what other competitors are doing. But I do want to look at it and see how they're showing up, because to me, it's very clear the way that our vendors are showing, other competitors are showing up. I'm not going to say too much on how they need to fix it, but there's definitely a clear way for me to see it. I usually use, like, for example, LinkedIn, Google, and programmatic ad libraries. It's all free monitoring tools that you can see. It's publicly available tooling that you can have. It's so critical for you to just do that due diligence and just look at what is actually being run, which markets are they running in. This really gives you so much intelligence of how you can differentiate yourself so easily. And it's not about copying them. It's not about saying, okay, well, they're going to do this in the Netherlands, or they're going to do that. They're doing this kind of messaging for migration. We're going to do the same. That is not how you win. That's how you get lost in the shuffle. That's how you stay absolutely the same with everyone else. And everyone gets, I get so many sellers like, well, this is what this company is doing. We need to update our website to look just like theirs. I'm like, then well, how are we different? You know, what makes us stand out? So that's what I always challenge my sellers. And when I challenge anyone who comes to me saying, we need to do exactly what they're doing, I'm like, well, if we're going to do exactly what they're doing, they don't make nearly as much revenue as we do. So let's do what we do best. And let's go ahead and make sure that we have a distinct voice here. So that's definitely something I always urge everyone to do. But you definitely need to look at what is actually happening in the market, right? It really helps you make sure you have a distinct voice, because then you're able to see what's actually running in the market, essentially. And I also want to make sure I track releases that are being done, so I can understand, like, where our competitors are with their competencies, where are they leading in different things that we can also bring up to our leadership and make sure that gives us a true competitive advantage. Because most of the time we do have the most competencies. Most of the times we're quite ahead of the game, right? So this is a way that might give us a moment of pause and see how we can go ahead and make sure we're reflecting ourselves properly in the market.
Linda, is it possible to give me an example of a successful MDF optimization that demonstrates the potential impact using those strategies when executed well?
Yeah, I think from our perspective, we've been really encouraged to use Partner Central, right? And to use a lot of the Marketing Central, which is assets, which is fantastic. But this, I think, would have not given us differentiation. So what I ended up having to do in campaign is I took it to our content team, our content director, and some of our external writers, and making sure that we can have a point of differentiation. I think this is what really helps us, because a lot of the times you will be tempted to just put your logo beside the vendor and call it a day. I mean, go for it, but I just don't think it'll really drive the results that you want to have, right? I would say to really think about how you're effectively, what you're actually saying, because it's like everyone else can say the exact same things, but again, you're not going to stand out. So I would resist all temptation for that. So what we've done is that we've been able to give we're being able to take all the vendor stats, all of the vendor information, third party information, to really frame our point of view and validate our point of view. I think that's critical for us. And what we've also done is making sure that we put a bit of a full funnel approach. We're not just launching an ebook and we have 400 leads from an ebook that convert into X amount of pipeline. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for, did we get, let's say, some resonance in the local market? And that's something that definitely worked really well for us when we mixed in brand awareness and demand generation into one, where we had them running simultaneously with all the campaigns. That's where we saw a significant uplift, right? So think about it. How do you differentiate yourself from the messaging that you have? What can you say, even if you're a smaller partner, what can you say that helps you? And think about a full funnel approach. Think about how you can make sure that you're not stopping at just an ebook download. How do you make sure that you're able to do that all up? The results for us are extremely great. We saw extreme increase in pipeline velocity, which means your leads are taking less time to convert because they're more informed. The more informed your audience is, the better your overall results will be.
Looking at the bigger picture, how do you build MDF programs that create sustainable long-term value rather than just short-term wins? What would be basically your advice for all the hyperscalers?
You can't just have one-off campaigns. That's the bottom line. You cannot think about the next 3 months. You need to think about the next year. Yes, everything will change in the next year, but your customers won't. You have to build their trust ultimately. Your main key in every campaign that you have is building that customer's trust. It doesn't matter what the messaging is. If they know who you are and they know that they can trust you to be the absolute expert when it comes to this vendor, you've got them. Otherwise, you're just relaunching and reintroducing yourself to a person. So it won't work.
Yeah, I think partner relationship management is super crucial for NDF success as well. How do you maintain a strong partnership while ensuring accountability for fund utilization?
This really is about the relationship building as a personal level. You need to be able to want to talk to each other, and you need to have those regular check-ins, and you need to have transparent reporting. That, I think, is one of those soft skills you need to acquire and to really hone in on, because you need to want to make sure that those regular check-ins are smooth and ready to go. And that's my biggest advice, is to hone in on your soft skills when it comes to this, because there's more chances than not you'll have the results to back it up. You'll need to have that relationship in place for them to trust the results that you're providing them.
What trends are you seeing in partner marketing that will shape how companies approach MDF in the next few years?
I'm definitely seeing much more of a trend with agentic AI, more automation with tasking, which I think is definitely something I want to start doing as well, which I've done in my personal life, but I want to do more so in my professional life. First, I'm so happy to see much more personalized data and communications to myself as a consumer. I definitely am seeing that much more. And I personally see this much more data driven. My marketers in 46, 45 different countries, I see that a lot of them are extremely senior, and even my most junior team members are so with it, if you will, right? They're much more in tune of understanding what exactly they need to deliver from a data perspective. Whereas 4 years ago, I didn't really see that, where I would see this hesitation to using data. I would see a lot more hesitance to it, where now I do see, depending on the maturity level, the playing field is becoming much more even, if you will.
For the companies that are just at the beginning of formalizing their MDF program success, what approach would you recommend to them? Where should they begin?
You need to be crystal clear on your goals, and you need to be crystal clear on what you want to achieve and what can you deliver. It's a bit of honesty on your side as a vendor and a partner of what you can actually deliver and how long does it take to deliver that, right? So I think that it starts there, but that's where you can start. And then you can talk about brand awareness, pipeline growth, and enablement. Because by having that conversation, you'll understand, okay, right, we need to enable X partner with this much information, or these different, let's say, programs or initiatives that we're running. That really helps you then scale out, right? Because then that will kind of give you a bit of a snowball effect of what you can actually grow out within your team. And I think overall, from a vendor perspective to partners, it needs to be straightforward. It can't be too complicated to initiate a campaign, to initiate a conversation. This needs to be quite clear cut and with easy milestones. This is something, as humans, we respond quite well to it. We understand each stage and how we can get to the next stage and unlock even more rewards. And I think there needs to be a bit of reward system for that as well. I also think that there needs to be basic tracking. Whether you don't have the latest and greatest, whether you're not using the most advanced technology or AI or programs or systems, you need to understand, all right, well, I do have CRM. I do have these basic, let's say, tools in my toolbox. How do you effectively go ahead and tell the vendor that you're able to generate X dollars in pipeline? That needs to be a question mark that you have to be crystal clear that you can answer. Everything will fall into place with that. You also need to make sure that you're working hand in hand with your vendor to make sure that you're leveraging those playbooks. Because if you're starting from scratch, this is a moment where you can lean into those playbooks, templates, trainings that you can go ahead and leverage. Most of the time, vendors will have a world of resources available to you. So it's really making sure that you're tapping into them and not disregarding them. This is one way for you to quickly succeed with them. This is a way that you could also go ahead and scale, right? This is how you can understand what you can do. But first of all, it's clarity on what you want to achieve and also clarity in what you can deliver from a data and attribution perspective. And of course, then ultimately, then lastly, it's making sure you're leveraging all the available resources your vendor has to offer. And if they don't have to offer it, then you can challenge the vendor to work with you on that.
As the companies grow, how do you scale your MDF programs? What works do you see working for a startup versus an enterprise organization?
Yeah, it varies, but it starts with the foundation, right? So when it comes to startups, enterprises, they're going to have very different approaches. Most time, enterprises will have existing tech stacks that you cannot mess with, and startups will be more agile and wanting to try the latest and greatest and have the funding to try the latest and greatest sometimes, and will be more lightweight and, let's say, flexible, but sometimes can have manual processes on both sides of the coin, right? Irrespective of where their tech stack really sits in. You want to be agile. That's the key for this because at the end of the day, you'll have a lot of campaigns running in motion that you will quickly lose touch of if you don't have the agility of making sure that you can pivot your campaigns or MDF accordingly. I think from what I really need to stress here is governance. There needs to be a clear owner. This cannot be sales/marketing owning the MDF. There needs to be a clear owner, whether it sits in sales or marketing. It needs to be a clear owner. Preferably, it would be a marketer who leads this and has the understanding to make sure that they're working in hand with sales. That to me would be my main driver here, is to make sure you have the governance in place. You're able to have a sense of automation. So obviously not everyone has the same tech stack all up, but you want to make sure you have a good level of automation to handle the volume that hopefully you'll be bringing and the complexity. Because again, every vendor I've worked with, they're not just selling one product and one offering, and neither are you as a partner. So you need to be able to have the nuance. So there needs to be enough of that built into your day-to-day life as well. And I think the last part here is making sure that the governance isn't a siloed governance with marketing. Sales, marketing, finance, everyone's on the same page. This will likely be a substantial funding that will be coming to your company, right? And you need to make sure that it's leveraged appropriately and that finance, sales, and everyone else along the way has visibility in your success, because it will be successful if you're implementing it with these levers that I'm telling you. The last bit here is also having KPIs and regular check-ins and reviews on where you're at, because as I mentioned earlier, you're going to have to start with clear KPIs and clear results, right? That you're going to work towards. So from my perspective, it's just about building a scalable processes along the way. So as you start from, let's say, $1 million as a company to like 500 million ARR, you need to make sure each step of the funnel, you have a clear governance model in place, a clear way of measurement, and you grow with that. That grows with you. And each phase of your growth, you're evaluating that model as well. That's one way you can scale up ultimately.
Let's move to some really quick fireside questions with actionable insights from your extensive partner marketing and global marketing experience, really. Biggest red flag in an MDF proposal that you see from a partner? Could be a regional marketing manager.
Lack of outcomes or vague objectives, that to me always screams red flag. And I guess if it doesn't tie into sales or pipeline, or if marketing and sales do not talk to each other, that red flag for me.
Most underutilized MDF activity that companies should be investing in, but you don't see many marketers asking for it or doing it.
Enabling and training. That is gold. If your sellers are not happy and or excited or have knowledge of it, I think that that's gold. And I think you need to make sure you're investing in it instead of just going on one-off campaigns. If your sellers are not enablement, you're not going to sell.
Best AI tool for partner marketing automation.
Well, I think I want to say maybe I'll be agnostic here, Gemini, Copilot, all the different sort of content generator tools. Those I think would be game changers for us to use.
Great. What's your favorite one? What's your number one?
Okay, probably Gemini. I would say Gemini for now.
Okay. One metric every MDF program should track, regardless the industry, regardless the country.
I'd say pipeline influence. I know that when you're running a brand campaign, the last thing you're thinking about is pipeline influence, but you need to be thinking about it because that's going to be the next step. So I think you need to understand how your pipeline is moving as a marketer. So I think that that's something that, irrespective if you drove it as a marketer, you need to understand what's making that click, because then that'll help you inform your next stage of your brand campaign, essentially.
Most common reason MDF programs fail to deliver any return of investment.
The lack of alignment between marketing and sales. I think that if there's sort of a disagreement, or if we're not speaking the same language on MQLs, SQLs, or what have you, this is going to lead to a lot of, let's say, crash and burn activations. And this is what you want to avoid. This is where you need to make sure you're aligning with sales. And it's not once against each other, you're both a team.
Key skill partner marketing managers need, but they kind of often lack having it.
Data literacy, to be honest, I think that it's not something that's innate to all of us, right? So I constantly challenge myself to make sure I'm skilling up to keep up with the latest and greatest. I think if you can understand what data you're looking at and all of the dashboards that are available to you at your company, you will become unstoppable because you'll be able to understand everything and really make sure you know the next step to it. So I think data literacy is highly underutilized, I think, or highly overlooked, in my opinion.
If you could implement only one single AI feature to MDF program, what would it be?
In my wish list is predictive analytics for funding allocation. I think I've built this as my own from many years ago with like a baby algorithm. And I think that really helps you because at the end of the day, we can be quite predictable as humans. We can be quite predictable in most ways. And if you can spend less time on the guessing game, I think this is something that you can really drive ROI in the future, right? And this is how you can scale quite quickly from New Zealand to the US, right? I think this is what really helps you get that all up.
Biggest misconception in partner marketing that you have seen in the tech industry?
It's just two logos together. You're just putting your logo and slapping a logo on something and calling it a day. I think it's much more strategic than that. I think it really is about a joint GTM and a GTM that really is a multiplier really for both businesses. And really at the end of the day, the customer ends up benefiting the most because that means you have the most skilled partner to really deliver the service that you need.
Linda, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure and super insightful for anyone interested in global marketing, MDF programs, attribution, and return of investment. Before we wrap up this episode, can you share with our listeners where they can connect with you and learn more about Crayon's also solutions and your work at Crayon?
Thank you, Adriana. I'm so happy to hear. Listeners can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on there and engaging with a lot of the partner marketing community. For a deeper dive into Crayon's approach, our website and resources are highly available for Alliances Marketing MDF optimization, so feel free to peruse that. We regularly publish insights and how we integrate with AI and data-driven strategies. I also highly encourage anyone managing MDF to reach out if you have any questions. I'm more than happy to collaborate and share learnings.
Any final thoughts or resources that you would like to recommend for any leaders that want to optimize their MDF program? Or as you said, they might have questions.
I think it's not being afraid of working with a vendor. It's not you doing their partner marketing on their behalf, right? It's really you as a partner expanding your reach and leveraging perhaps that more well-known logo to really help you stand out. So I would say not to just turn it down because there's a perception that is more vendor. You could still be a vendor agnostic while working with all the vendors, essentially.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Linda. Your practical approach to MDF optimization and AI-enhanced partner marketing shows us that successful partnerships aren't just about the funds you allocate, they're also about the strategic intelligence you apply to your investments. To all listeners, remember that MDF programs are more than just marketing budgets, they're strategic investments in business growth and market expansion. Linda's insights demonstrate that combining traditional partner marketing wisdom with AI-driven optimization can transform these programs from cost centers to revenue engines. Don't forget to subscribe to AI Everywhere Leaders podcast on YouTube or Spotify, your preferred listening tool, for more insights on leveraging AI for business growth and partnership success. If this episode helped you think differently about MDF optimization and partner marketing, please share it with your network and leave us a review. Until next time, remember that in the world of partner marketing, success isn't measured by how much you spend. It's actually measured by how strategically you invest and how effectively you enable your partners to drive mutual growth. Until next time, thank you.